It was a summer evening that smelled like rain and baby lotion. My wife had finally gotten our 6-month-old, Mason, down for the night. A miracle after 2 sleepless days. I was halfway through cleaning bottles when I noticed the soft flicker of red and blue lights bouncing off our living room window. For a heartbeat, I thought someone in the cul-de-sac was being arrested. Then came the knock. Firm, rhythmic, official. Then came the knock. Firm, rhythmic, official. And just before I tell you what happened when I opened that door, if real stories of neighbor drama and HOA chaos fascinate you, hit subscribe now. We've got plenty more tales where peace and property lines collide. I opened the door and faced 2 officers. One was clearly apologetic. The other looked like he was trying not to roll his eyes before speaking. "Sir, we had a noise complaint," the sympathetic one said, glancing toward the dark nursery visible behind me. "A noise complaint?" I repeated, incredulous. I glanced at the baby monitor. Mason was snoring. Actually snoring. Then, like clockwork, the streetlight across the road flicked on, illuminating her. Karen Miller, chairwoman of the HOA, self-appointed savior of suburban peace. There she stood on the sidewalk with a phone in hand, and that tight-lipped smirk that told the world she'd just done something she believed was heroic. She called out toward the officers, voice dripping with moral superiority. "That baby's been screaming all day? I thought he was in danger." The officers exchanged looks. One took a slow breath, the kind of breath you take before telling your kid the truth about Santa. "Ma'am, we didn't hear any crying when we arrived," the younger officer said, clearly trying to sound diplomatic. Karen was undeterred. "You didn't hear it because he stopped when you pulled up," she insisted. "It's been constant lately. It's disturbing everyone's peace. The HOA has rules about sustained noise." I knew exactly what she was referring to. HOA Rule 8C. No excessive, repeated, or prolonged creation of noise beyond reasonable levels. Usually meant for leaf blowers or teenagers' car stereos, not infants learning to exist. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level. "He's a baby, not a jackhammer." Karen gasped like I'd just confessed to treason. "Excuse me? I pay HOA dues to live in a peaceful community. If you can't control your child, maybe this neighborhood isn't right for you." The older officer turned slightly toward me, lowering his voice. "Sir, you're fine. We'll just note that there's no disturbance. You're not in trouble." But when he looked back toward Karen, something flickered in his eyes, recognition. Subtle at first, then sharper. "Wait," he said, frowning slightly. "You live over on Clover Lane, right?" Karen looked thrown. "Yes," she said slowly. He nodded. "That's what I thought. You called us last year about the teenager parking too close to your mailbox, right?" He sighed through his nose, like someone reliving a recurring migraine. "And about the mail carrier supposedly speeding. And the Christmas lights being too bright." Karen's composure cracked. "Those were legitimate concerns. This neighborhood is going downhill because people have no respect for order. My baby isn't a code violation." I cut in before she could list my crimes in alphabetical order. The older officer took a step closer to Karen, voice calm but unmistakably tired. "Ma'am, we're not here to issue tickets for crying infants. Don't call 911 unless it's an emergency. This isn't one." Karen's smile froze, tight and brittle. For a moment, I thought she might apologize, but she pivoted instead. "Fine," she hissed. "But the HOA will hear about this. Rules are rules." The officers left. As their cruiser rolled away, I thought that was the end of it. I had no idea that night was only the opening move of what neighbors would soon call the Great Baby Noise War of Maple Hollow. Because by morning, Karen's wrath had evolved, from midnight complaining to full-scale HOA warfare. The next morning, a bright yellow violation notice was taped to my front door. The bold print screamed, "Notice of excessive noise violation, HOA Bylaw 8C." Below it, Karen had delicately initialed her signature with a looping flourish that practically smelled of smugness. I couldn't help but laugh. Not a cheerful laugh. One of those exasperated, "You've got to be kidding me" chuckles that come right before rage. My wife, bleary-eyed and exhausted, nearly cried when she saw it. What does she want us to do? Mute the baby. And that was when I decided this wasn't going to be one of those grin and bear it stories. If Karen wanted a noise complaint crusade, she was going to get a symphony of proof. So I became Dad, private investigator. I dove into the HOA bylaws like a medieval scholar deciphering curses. Section 8C was vague, defining excessive noise as anything unreasonable and sustained beyond a lawful threshold. But no threshold was ever defined. Perfectly unenforceable. Still, I needed more than logic. I needed evidence. That's when I went full spy mode. I installed a couple of smart cameras, one facing the front walk, another angled toward the fence that bordered Karen's property. I synced them with a noise decibel app. Anytime a sound exceeded 55 decibels, which, by the way, is quieter than a running dishwasher, it logged the timestamp. The nursery stayed between 30 and 40 dB almost constantly. Mason's occasional cries? 5 minutes max, under 60 dB. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't exactly quiet herself. My cameras caught her standing by her hedges, ranting into her phone almost daily. She loved speakerphone, a modern tragedy. Her voice cut through the air like an angry parrot. Her dog, a perpetually offended Pomeranian named Mr. Buttons, barked with every gust of wind. Plot twist. The HOA rules included a clause about domesticated animal noise disturbances. Up to a $250 fine for repeated barking over 3 days. I smiled. The universe had handed me irony on a silver platter. A few days later, I got my first HOA summons, an official hearing. Noise disturbances unresolved. Please attend for further action. Beneath it was Karen's typed note. Documentation and video evidence are encouraged. If she wanted documentation, she was about to get an entire PowerPoint. Still, I wanted backup. So I contacted Mark Dempsey, a local attorney who specialized in property rights and HOA overreach. Former prosecutor, sharp as razors, with the perpetually amused eyes of someone who'd seen suburbia's weirdest cases. I handed him my folder of screenshots, decibel logs, timestamps, and yes, even nightly recordings showing perfect peace and quiet. After reviewing everything, Mark laughed so hard he nearly dropped his pen. She accused a baby of violating a noise bylaw that doesn't even have a noise threshold. This might be my new favorite case. We started building the counter-strategy. Step 1. Verify the HOA's own violations. Mark suggested I discreetly record Karen's repeated 911 calls if possible. Turns out, non-emergency misuse of 911 is a finable offense under county law. I also filed a formal noise report against Mr. Buttons. The deputy who came out was the same officer from that first night. When he saw it was me, he cracked a knowing grin. I was wondering when I'd be back here. Guess Karen's keeping us both busy. He walked the property with me while Mr. Buttons barked heroic ballads from behind the fence. Honestly, the deputy said, scribbling on his notepad, this is classic HOA overreach. Keep recording, and show up at that hearing. Bring your lawyer if you can. That weekend, Karen tried her next stunt. She left a note on my mailbox. Due to ongoing noise issues, HOA board will consider additional fines after your hearing date. I caught her placing it, on camera. The smug swagger, the satisfied tilt of her chin, it screamed villain origin story. My wife, meanwhile, found reluctant amusement in the whole ordeal. At least you finally have a hobby, she teased as I labeled my evidence folders like a detective show reject. I grinned. Yeah, and the plot twist is coming. Because little did Karen know, Mark had found something even juicier buried in the HOA meeting minutes from 2 months back, something that would unravel her whole campaign against us. Not only was she misusing emergency services, but she also had a pending complaint with the county for harassment against another resident she targeted and failed to report it to the HOA board. By the time hearing day arrived, I was fully loaded with evidence, legal backing, and the kind of quiet confidence that makes tyrants nervous. The community meeting room looked like the set of a reality show reunion. Cheap folding chairs, bitter smiles, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights. Karen sat at the head of the long table, flanked by her fellow board members. Her pearl necklace gleamed like a badge of command. She'd stacked her papers neatly, ready for what she believed would be my public shaming. But she wasn't ready for this. Mark, the attorney, arrived right on time, briefcase in one hand and a calm smirk in place of a greeting. He nodded toward me. Let's give them a show worth their HOA dues. When Karen opened the meeting, her voice carried that passive-aggressive sweetness reserved for PDA emails and slow cashiers. This special session concerns noise violations originating from Lot 27, Mr. Miller's property. As you've all heard, There have been repeated disturbances, verified by multiple residents. Multiple? I whispered. Karen smiled without looking at me. Yes, several. Anonymous complaints. Mark raised his hand. Madam Chair, before we proceed, could we confirm that these anonymous complaints were filed through proper channels? Karen froze for half a beat too long. Of course. All valid complaints go through me as chair. Mark's smile sharpened. So then, they're not anonymous. You filed them. The room rippled with quiet murmurs. Karen's jaw tightened. I act in the community's best interest. Wonderful, Mark said, clicking open his laptop. Then you'll appreciate my client bringing proper documentation. I hooked my laptop to the projector cable, and the first slide lit up the wall. A week of noise level readings, all under the county's residential threshold. The next slide played footage of quiet evenings, trees swaying, cicadas humming, Mason asleep. Then I played the clip of Karen storming up to my mailbox to tape that warning note. Gasps whispered through the room. Those monitors also picked up another noise issue, Mark said, smoothly transitioning to a new slide. A thundering bark echoed through the speakers, Mr. Buttons in full opera mode. Now, Section 8D of the same bylaws prohibits repeated animal noise. This occurs 3 times per day over 7 consecutive days. Bylaw violation, correct? Karen's face flushed red, but she tried to keep her tone steady. This is a blatant distraction. We're not here to talk about dogs. We're here because this man's child. Mark raised a hand. Careful. County Code 412 regards minors as protected individuals from discriminatory HOA enforcement. Babies cannot be treated as sources of nuisance noise. Karen blanched. Also, he continued, my client's cameras captured your 911 call and the responding officer confirming it was not an emergency. County statute defines repeated false emergency calls as misuse, subject to criminal penalty and HOA insurance infractions. And that's when the door opened. In stepped that very same officer from night 1, clipboard in hand, calm as sunrise. He gave the board a curt nod. Afternoon. I was asked to provide clarification regarding recent noise complaints. Karen looked ready to disintegrate. The officer flipped through his report. After multiple investigations, there was no evidence of excessive noise. However, the complainant, Mrs. Miller, placed 3 non-emergency calls. These were recorded. We've issued a formal warning. Someone in the back whispered, that's the 3rd time this year. Another board member shifted in his seat, clearly annoyed. Karen's voice trembled. This is harassment. You're all conspiring. The officer spoke evenly. Ma'am, I recognize the address because you also accused the Lindens of attempted loitering when they were hanging decorations. Misuse of emergency services wastes our department's time. The room fell dead silent except for the hum of the lights and Mr. Button's faint bark from outside the window. I turned to the board. I have no wish to inflame things further. I just want peace and fairness. Mark folded his arms. According to HOA protocol, a board member who violates association ethics or uses her position for personal disputes is subject to removal. The vice chair cleared his throat. Given the evidence and county findings, I motioned to suspend Mrs. Miller's chair privileges pending review. Karen gaped, eyes wide. You can't. Motion seconded, someone said from the side. And just like that, vote passed. Majority. Karen sat there, stunned, spine stiff, lips pressed into a thin white line. The officer quietly handed her a copy of the misuse warning, and for a moment, the woman who'd once called 911 on a baby looked very, very small. As people filed out, the vice chair approached me. Sorry you had to go through all that, Mr. Miller. You handled yourself better than I would have. I smiled, holding Mason's baby monitor. Guess the loudest noise in the neighborhood ended up being the truth. The officer chuckled on his way out. Next time Karen calls, maybe she should report herself. In the days that followed, the HOA rescinded all noise citations. The bylaws were rewritten with measurable definitions and actual decibel limits. Because of one baby's bedtime, feud turned case study. Karen eventually resigned for personal reasons, though rumor had it her husband insisted after realizing they were running out of friends on the block. As for me, I took one last late-night walk that summer. The cicadas hummed again, the air soft, Mason breathing peacefully through the baby monitor clipped to my belt. The street was quiet, not because silence had been enforced, but because justice finally had. And to any parent listening to this, when someone says your baby's cry is too loud, remember, sometimes that's the sound of a life that'll outgrow petty noise.